topics, or ideas, what you consume influences who you become. On the Mind and Matter podcast, we learn together from the best scientists and thinkers alive today about how your mind-body reacts to what you feed it. Before starting Mind and Matter, I spent 10 years in academia doing scientific research. I got a PhD in neuroscience where I focused on neuroendocrinology and the neurobiology of behavior, and before that, I specialized in molecular, developmental, and evolutionary genetics. I use my scientific background to help parse and translate the information that guests share on the podcast. In addition to the podcast, I write long-form written content inspired by the show where I integrate what I've learned across episodes. I also have a free weekly newsletter where I provide you with upcoming guests, share links, and provide commentary on scientific studies and research that I'm reading, and more. Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. Thank you very much for joining me.
Sure, it's my pleasure.
Do you want to start off by just telling everyone a little bit about who you are and what your lab studies?
Yes. So I am a neuroscientist, but actually I was trained as a human geneticist. So early on in my career, I was using human genetics as a tool to study human neurological, neurodegenerative diseases. But in the last almost 30 years now, my lab has been focusing on using human genetics and then mouse genetics and many, many tools, including neuroscience tools, to study human sleep behaviors.
Yeah, and so we'll get into a lot of the genetics of sleep and different aspects of sleep. And you've studied a lot of stuff here, but I want people to understand at the beginning some of the different sleep traits there are. So sleep sort of a general term, and there are different aspects of it, each of which can be thought of as a separate trait. So there's the duration of sleep, how long someone needs to sleep, how deeply they sleep, how quickly they fall asleep, all of these things. Can you walk us through some of the major sleep traits that you and others study, especially those that are more highly heritable from a genetic standpoint?
Right. Since I'm a human geneticist, so if you ask me, I will say, well, a lot of our behaviors or traits are genetic. But as you say, almost every aspect of sleep probably likely to have some genetic contribution. But what my research group, me and my collaborators, what we have been studying really is just more focused on two big aspects of sleep behavior. And one is about our sleep schedule, and the other one is about our sleep duration. So sleep schedule is really about what is best time for you to go to bed, what is the best time for you to get up. And so it's more of in sync with your body rhythm, biological circadian rhythm. Now, sleep duration, on the other hand, is more about how many hours of sleep do we need that will be best for us, right? And again, these are genetic traits, so everybody is a little bit different, and you need to find out what's best for you. Just because somebody needs 8 hours doesn't mean you have to have 8 hours. Or just because somebody needs to go to bed 10 o'clock doesn't mean you have to go to bed 10 o'clock. So,
But these things, so when we fall asleep or tend to fall asleep naturally, how long we need to sleep naturally, these things are partially genetic. Like how much of this is genetically determined?
I think so, but I'm not aware that people are studying genetics of that part of sleep feature, right? How long does it take to fall asleep? How easy it is for each person to fall asleep? But we do know that some of the people we study, they have this trait of go to bed and the head hit pillow and then they are gone. They are in deep sleep. So it is genetically controlled somewhat.
Mm-hmm. And so when we think about sleep duration, the numbers that people tend to have in their head is that most people need something like 7 or 8, maybe 9 hours of sleep. But obviously there's wide variation. Can you talk a little bit about what the distribution of sleep duration needs are for adult humans? Roughly speaking, how many people need, 7 versus 8 or even more or even less than that?
Yeah, so there is, it's like all most of the features, it has a normal distribution curve. And majority of the people fall into 7.5 to 9 hours. So if I have to take a guess, I would say maybe 80% of the people fall into this range, 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep. And then there's the end on both sides, the tail to the very small number of the very tail end that has more extreme sleep behavior. And then when I say more extreme, it's like less than 6.5 hours or more than 10, 11, 12 hours. And those are more extreme cases.
So the vast majority of people tend to need, 7 to 9 hours, roughly speaking.
Right.
But then there are some people who naturally need more than 9, maybe even 10 or 11, and some people who can get by with as little as 6, give or take.
Yes, or less. Yes.
Wow. Yeah. And so, like when we find these people, when we find the short sleepers, the people who can get by with 5 or 6 hours of sleep, maybe even less in rare cases, are they perfectly normal in other respects? Do they have any deficits, or are they truly able to sleep less and get all of the recuperation that comes with sleep?
Right. So this is a very good question, actually. I think majority of the people who say they are short sleeper might not be truly natural short sleeper, which is the people who we study are truly natural short sleepers. I think what happened is a lot of people train themselves with the different methods, right? Could be the diet, could be whatever, ways. I've heard many different ways to train them. And so they sleep less than 7 hours. And those people, I think, are not truly natural short sleeper. Those are the people who are more likely 3, 4, 5 decades later, they will then start to have some kind of disease or whatever, some problem come with not getting good enough and long enough sleep for long term, right? And so there are people who are natural short sleeper that naturally born not needing that much. The people we study are 4 to 6 hours or less than 4 occasionally, and they don't have any problem. They live to very long life and have no problem at all.
I see. So there's true natural short sleepers that can get by with 4 to 6 hours of sleep per day as an adult, occasionally even less, and they seem to be fine. So they don't age faster, they don't get Alzheimer's disease more, or anything like this. No. So somehow their sleep is better or deeper or more efficient. Can you talk a little bit about what does their sleep actually look like? Are they going into deeper stages of sleep faster? Is the sleep architecture different? I would guess that, somehow, some way, whatever is happening during sleep that is, recharging our batteries, so to speak, it's happening faster or more efficiently in these people. But, what exactly is that?
Exactly. You said it very well. So what happened is almost all these natural short sleepers, they will say that when they go to bed, when their head hits the pillow, they are gone, right? So which tells us that they can fall into deep sleep pretty quickly. And so after 20 years of studying these people, we now have enough evidence to suggest that their sleep qualities or efficiency is better. And when I say that, it took us many, many years to realize that, because at the beginning, for many years, people asked me, well, how do you know you are studying people who naturally need less sleep? Maybe you are just studying people who are manic or whatever problem they have. And I questioned about that myself too, right? I had no idea. But after several years and look at many of these people, we came to realize that it's very consistent. They have a list of features that are very consistent among these people, including they live a healthy, long life and very active, right? And so it occurred to me that maybe this is saying that their sleep quality or efficiency is better, and that's why they can sleep less and yet live a long, healthy life. Now, when I say sleep efficiency, what I mean is that if we understand that our bodies is like a machine that never stop working, right? And during the day, our body needs to do all kinds of things. I need to be able to talk to you and listen to you and understand each other. I need to be able to eat and drink, exercise and walk. All these functions I need to do during the day so I can live a normal life. But in the night, when we go to bed, our bodies, again, has a whole list of functions that the body needs to do, including remove toxins, dead cells, repair a lot of damages, and recharge, like you say, the fill of the battery, right? And many of these functions, and probably a lot of functions we have not discovered. And all these functions for people, a regular sleeper, it takes 8 hours, somewhere around 8 hours to finish all these functions to a level that we can live a healthy life and hopefully live to 80 or 90 years old. But for the truly nature short sleepers, only take 4 to 6 hours. And not only that, their bodies probably can perform these functions to even better, like closer to 100% completion. And that's why they can be so active, so healthy. This is people like in 80s and still doing triathlon. And so it's like, that's the reason. And so we decided to test this idea, and then we used Alzheimer to test this idea. And we now know that that's true, right? Their sleep efficiency or quality is better, and that's how they can do this. And we also have unpublished data that they can also help with neurodevelopmental problems, right? And so again, the neurodegeneration diseases, they can prevent those diseases. I think it speaks to the function of when we sleep, our body is remove toxins and waste product, whatever, more efficiently for the short sleepers. But for the neurodevelopment problem, I think it speaks to the fact that the short sleepers, their body can repair things that are not perfect faster, right? And so we have evidence to suggest that's the case. Yeah.
So one of the features you say that the short sleepers share is they fall asleep very quickly. So, like I'm definitely not that type of person. It takes me a little while to fall asleep each night. I can't just zonk out the second my head touches the pillow. So even if so let's say I'm in bed 9 hours, it might take me a half hour to fall asleep, 20 or 30 minutes, let's say. And so even though I'm laying down for 9 hours, I might only get 8.5 hours of sleep. One way to start to think about this is, okay, the short sleepers just fall asleep immediately. So there's no lag between laying down and falling asleep.
Right.
But when you guys actually look at, say, the sleep architecture, the transitions from non-REM into deep non-REM into REM sleep, and the cycles of all of those sleep phases, does the actual sleep architecture in the EEG signal look different in short sleepers compared to other people?
Yeah. So we have looked at 5 of these short sleepers, the sleep architecture, and we have not found significant difference between these 5 people and versus normal people. But I think 5 is not enough number. And we did that right before pandemic. And so right now we're trying to come back and do more. So the short question is, we don't know the answer. And another possibility is to use mouse model to see if we can address this question. And so we're just getting into trying to use machine learning or AI to help us look at all of our EEG data to see if we can see any sleep architectural differences. Because if we just look at REM sleep or non-REM sleep, it's very crude. And all we can say is, oh yeah, less non-REM, less REM, but it doesn't tell us much. Right. And so the short answer is we don't know, but we're very actively trying to address this question.
Okay, so you've only looked at sleep architecture and the EEG signal in a handful of these short sleepers. They're probably, right, these short sleepers are relatively rare, so it's hard to get them into the labs to do this stuff.
Yeah.
But even though you've only studied 5, there's no obvious difference in sleep architecture.
Right.
It's not like they're going right into deep sleep and staying in twice as long or something like that.
No.
And it sounds like you see this phenotype, you see this distribution of sleep duration need in humans and in other animals, including experimental animals. So when you start to get into the genetics of this, what does that start to tell you? Are there genes that consistently associate with this short sleeper phenotype? And do you see them in both humans and animals?
Well, so our approach is very different from many other researchers. I think we are the only group I'm aware of doing this. So what we do is we find a mutation in human and then put it into mouse model to look at whether the mice can recapitulate the phenotype. And we have mutation that we identify in human that we think are fantastic candidate, but when we put into mice, the mice don't recapitulate phenotype. In that case, we have to give up the project. We cannot continue. But most of the mutation, when we put into mice, they do recapitulate the phenotype. In that case, we can say, yeah, so these genes that they show same phenotype in human and mice, these are genes that they share probably in mice and human. related to sleep, right? And that's all I can say, because for the gene identified from model organism, unless you can somehow prove that it's relevant to human, I don't know how you can prove that. Then it's very difficult to make conclusion that that's consistent throughout different organism, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's hard to say that. I would say one mutation that we have found, it was first identified in mice. It's called SIK3, salt-induced kinase 3. Was first identified in mouse models, and we found one human subject with the SIK3 mutation. So that's the only case that really from animal model to human.
Hmm. So the short sleepers that you identify, they don't all have the same mutation.
No, no,
I see. So
many,
there's
yeah.
there's multiple ways to influence sleep. So you have this shorter sleep need.
But the way I think of it now is that because it's a very complex system with many different pathways, molecular pathway and also circuit, right? And so you can see how mutation in different pathway or different circuit, somehow it has to merge, it has to converge to lead to almost identical phenotype in all these short sleepers, right?
Hmm.
Somehow the pathway has to converge, even though we are finding all these different mutations, but it's my hope that we will find the converge point, both at the molecular level and the circuit level.
Hmm. So I mean, so what do we really understand about like the sleep duration phenotype? Do we have any sense for like what the actual underlying biology is that is working faster, more efficiently?
No, actually. So we are working very hard to figure out, right? And so again, I feel how fast can we get the answer? Because we have been doing this for 20 years, and over the years, many people say, "Oh, when are you going to find this? And when are you going to find that?" How fast can we go is really is depend on how much funding we have, right? And so it's clear that to me that there should be a converged pathway, but how fast can we get there? We are not there yet, but how fast can we get there depending on how much funding we have. And we're doing everything we can. We're doing the circuits, the molecular pathway with many different approaches.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
And just beyond the sleep duration phenotypes, when we think about what's actually happening during sleep that enables it to be recuperative. Like we all have an intuitive sense for what sleep does, right? It recharges
right,
us, it gives us energy. If you
right,
don't sleep, you clearly have problems.
right,
So something is, being fixed and becoming better when we sleep. But what
right,
exactly do we know about what that is? You mentioned earlier that you can clear out toxins and stuff and repair damage that happens during waking. And that makes sense, right? We're up, we're
right,
awake, we're using our
right,
bodies, we're using our brains. There's
right,
probably waste accumulating, there's probably
right,
stuff breaking and debris that
right.
accumulates. What actually happens during sleep that sort of clears things out and repairs what's been broken?
Well, again, that's a very good question that we don't have a clear answer, right? And so there was a hypothesis about how our brain, this is purely from Alzheimer or brain disease point of view, that our brain can clear our waste product faster through cerebral spinal fluid or glymphatic system. And from our data and also some data from a collaborator's lab, it seems like that's not the main pathway, right? So we're looking for why why it can clear out waste faster, or it actually just doesn't accumulate waste product at all locally, right? And why is that? And so we're still looking into that. And those are all very good questions. And we don't really know. And again, we can say that the clear waste product and repair, recharge, and memory consolidation, these are all obvious functions that we already know. But I bet there are many, many other functions that we don't know, right? Because if we don't, most people know, right? If you don't get good sleep at night, next day, your brain it's all foggy, you cannot think very well. And so there are many functions that we still have not discovered yet.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about what you mentioned the glymphatic system? Can you define that for people and explain what that is?
Actually, I'm not an expert on glymphatic system. You probably should ask a glymphatic system. It's more of like the neurons has a outside neurons has a space, and there are liquid there, right? And so all this liquid can then flow to like you can think of like a river and all flow to merged branch and eventually all converge to the cerebral spinal fluid and then clear out our brain. And so essentially that's people say that it's glymphatic system or it's immune. It's more of immune clearance system. And so
I see. So, but we're talking about the fluid that's sort of in and around all of the neurons in the nervous system,
right,
the lubrication of the nervous system, so to
right,
speak, and
right.
this can fill up with stuff. Some of it's
Yeah,
probably
like
junk
waste
and
product.
gunk,
Yes,
and it needs to be
yes.
cleared out from time to time.
Right. Yeah. And you can think of it like the river. That's the way I think of it, right? It all merged to a smaller branch of river and then go to a main branch and then clear out our body, our brain and stuff. So,
Mhm, mhm. And sleep duration can differ from person to person. So some people are short sleepers, some people are long sleepers, most people are normal, that middle sort of 7 to 9 hour range. But sleep duration can all sleep the amount of sleep that one needs can also change within a single person depending
yes,
on like what happened. We've probably
yes,
all had experiences of staying up late one night, needing more sleep the next day, or
right,
maybe we're outside working or exercising
right,
more, and that changes our
right.
sleep duration needs. What are some of the main things that change someone's daily sleep duration need in terms of like what you do in a day? Is exercise one? Is diet one? What are the main things that affect that for
Right,
someone?
right. I think those are the two main things. I have heard people email me, a lot of people email me about their sleep. Many people email me about if they stick to a certain diet, they sleep less. Or if they do certain type of the exercise and they sleep less. And I think those are the two main things. But I also want to bring up a point that sleep is very uniquely individual trait. There are people on this planet that sleep two bouts, right? 2 hours here, 2 hours there, or 3 hours here, 3 hours there, or something of two fragments, right? A lot of people do that, and so it's interesting. That's not everybody sleep the same way, but I would say people from all the emails I have received, exercise and diet, especially diet, seems to be the main thing that people say that. But then I want to caution people that we don't have scientific long-term study to prove that if you sleep less based on your diet, on the long term, it won't affect your health. There's no data to support that, right? So that we have to remember that. Another thing we have to remember is, like myself, if I need 8 hours of sleep, I can actually train myself to sleep 7 hours or 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get used to that for like in 2 weeks, I can get used to that. And I can actually live like that for decades. The problem is after 2 weeks, I will be performing at 70 to 80% of my capacity, and I can live like that for decades. And most people don't understand, don't even know, right?
Yeah. So I mean, you can train yourself to sleep less if you've got to, get up for work early and work later or whatever. And it might seem like you're normal and functioning because, you're not completely debilitated by it, but, you're performing at 80% of what you would. And that can go on for years and years. And there's probably is problems that accumulate over time. You probably are becoming more likely to get neurodegeneration or some age-related cognitive decline later in life, but that doesn't happen right away. It's this sort of
Exactly.
cumulative slow thing.
Exactly. And that's why when I started to study sleep at the very beginning, people always say, well, why should we study sleep? Because sleep doesn't kill you. And I always say, well, it doesn't kill you in the short term, but in the long term, probably sleep is the one of the major underlying factor that lead to many, many diseases later on in life, right? So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because it's a long-term effect, not short-term.
And is it true that people, in my experience, it seems like people tend to sleep less as they get older? Is that
Right,
like, do we need less sleep as we get older, or are the systems that sort of keep us asleep breaking as we
right.
age?
Yeah, it's just it's the latter. It's that as we age, the sleep mechanism start to deteriorate, and so we cannot stay asleep longer. So a lot of people start to say, "Oh, I wake up in the middle of night, and then I cannot fall back to sleep," right? And that's very common in people who start to age. But I always say that actually, if you look at the literature, and I think that's true, that most people actually wake up during the night, except when you are younger, you don't remember. You can fall back asleep very quickly. So you actually don't remember you woke up. The problem is, as you get older, you cannot fall back as fast. And therefore you remember, oh, I woke up. And then so you went to the bathroom and you went to do something. And then, next thing. But there are ways that you can help yourself to go back to sleep. And that I was, suggest that people do that, try to figure out a way to go back to sleep and sleep till, maybe more reasonable hours. Or they can take a nap during the day, actually.
What about, so you said you also study the timing of sleep, when people tend to fall asleep, when people tend to wake up. Just from life, there are people who are clear night owls. They like to stay up later, and people who like to get up early. We probably all know people like this. How much of that is a heritable trait, and what actually causes that in terms of what would make someone wake up earlier if we're sort of all exposed to the same daily light rhythms in theory?
Yes. And this again is very similar to how long the sleep duration. It's genetically determined, but the people we look at have very strong genetic mutations, so they are more extreme, similar to the sleep duration. And most people probably have mild SNP, small DNA change. Many small change, mild SNP work together to determine your sleep schedule and your sleep duration. That's what happened for most people. And most people fall into the range of 10 p.m. to midnight. They need to go to bed about that time. And most people need to get up 6 to 8 a.m. That's like majority of people, again, like 80%, 70 to 80% people fall in there. And there are smaller number of people at the very tail end. So the people we studied, some of them need to go to bed 4 or 5 p.m. before dinner, or get up like midnight or something. And some of them, very, very night owls. And night owls are harder to study than morning lark, because night owls has genetically is not as straightforward as a morning lark. Yeah.
And are there any clear genetic patterns in terms of the types of genes that tend to affect sleep timing?
Yeah. So circadian rhythm, 2017, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was given to 3 people study Drosophila fly, fruit fly circadian rhythm. And so the circadian rhythm field, people understand there is a molecular clock, with a different molecule, and they form this clock, and it's a transcriptional, translational feedback loop. And this loop, one cycle takes about 24 hours, and that molecular clock control our all body physiological rhythms, and sleep-wake schedule is just one of this thing under this regulation. However, most people study model organism completely, or really mostly ignore the other very important factors for human beings, because animals live in a lab. The environment is consistent, right? Even mice in the mouse room, they all subject to the same temperature, same air, same light schedule. But we don't do that, right? We live in the normal world. We are subjecting to all. So in our sleep schedule, there are another very major part that regulate our sleep schedule is our entrainment mechanism. So our body clock runs about 24 hours, but it's not exactly 24 hours. So there are many things that come in to adjust the clock for 24 hours. And this daily light hour cycle is the strongest entrainment cue to adjust it. But there are many things like the time you eat, the time you exercise, the thing you do, all can participate. So we are finding mutation that actually in human, it's in this entrainment pathway. So there are actually two major pathways regulate our sleep schedule. One is entrainment. It's all about how your body adjusts to the environmental factors. And the other one is molecular clock that runs 24 hours in every cell of our body.
I see. So there's the core molecular clock. I actually just discussed that with Joseph Takahashi on another episode. This is the molecular mechanism that's constantly sort of cycling in. It's keeping an internal molecular cycle on an approximate 24-hour period.
Right.
But then that needs to be entrained or synced up with the external world. And so that's where things like light and temperature and physical activity all come into play. So obviously the sun rises and sets every day, and that light goes into our body and helps entrain or set the phase of that molecular clock. But some people, it sounds like some people for genetic reasons entrain to it differently. Like maybe the light going away causes them to fall asleep faster or slower or something like that.
Yes. So it's the entrainment mechanism does not work properly, so that it makes them want to go to bed earlier or later than most people.
And do we know the details for exactly how that works? Like why it results in earlier or later?
Not yet. Yeah, we literally just found the first few mutation on the entrainment pathway. So it may take us a few years to really get more understanding about the mechanism.
And when we think about, so if sleep varies so much from person to person, some people can get by with 4 to 6, but some people need 9 or even more. Most people need 7 or 8 or 9. The question is, like, why does that variation exist? I mean, naively, you would think, well, it would be advantageous if you could get by with 4 or 5. Why don't more people have a shorter sleep duration if that would be an advantage? I guess one idea there would be, well, maybe for most of human history, when we weren't living in the safety of civilization, there's actually advantages to being behaviorally, quiet for the whole nighttime period if you're a diurnal animal, or vice versa if you're nocturnal. But I guess the question is, what, in a sense, why aren't there more people that are shorter sleepers? Because that would seem like an advantage. Like you can just stay up and do more stuff and get more done.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people ask me this question, and I think my answer is always that actually, like you say, there was no advantage to be a short sleeper, especially before electricity was discovered, right? If it was dark, what could you do in the darkness? You read next to candle, and how long can you read next to candlelight, or some very, very limited things that you can do. And it probably was dangerous to go outside, right, in the darkness with all the animals outside. And so there was no advantages, and therefore it's a newer mutation, and that's why it's so rare. Now, on the other hand, why do people have longer sleep? That I think is less clear. But genetic mutation is naturally occurring, right? Because we are subjected to environmental factors, sunlight, and all these things that can cause DNA mutation, right? And it's just nature, a part of the nature occurring DNA mutation. And I would say that because long sleeper, again, it's even more rare than short sleeper, right? And so I think it might be just nature occurring mutations. We only have one long sleeper mutation so far. It's not published, but we have one mutation.
I see. So short sleepers are rare, but long sleepers are even more rare.
Yeah.
So it really is the vast, vast majority of people that are in that normal middle range.
Right.
And so, are there any specific ways that we know today to make someone need less sleep? Is there like a specific dietary intervention or certain drugs or anything that reliably makes sleep duration shorter for people?
Yeah. So this is a very good question, right? And that's what my research lab also started to do this. We want to translate what we have learned from short sleeper, translate into something that can allow everyone to be like this natural sleeper, because it's not just cutting your sleep time shorter and then so you have more time. You want to do it in a safe way so that you, on the long-term basis, you don't get sick, you don't get any diseases, right? And so we're trying to do that. But I think it's very important to remember we want to be able to do this without having bad side effect, because I always tell my people the worst thing is if we come up something and people take it and it's worse than if they just get Alzheimer, right? That would be horrible consequences. So we're trying to do that. And right now, other than that, I'm not aware of anything that's been proven that you can take or you can do and can help you, make you become this truly natural short sleeper, and that we know there's no negative consequences. I'm not aware of that. But we're very interested in translating this into something that we can allow everybody, because I think it can dramatically decrease the incidences of many diseases, especially diseases of aging, right? And also economically, it will be a huge impact, because I always use this as example, right? If I am a 8-hour sleeper, and if I can just sleep 7 hours, let's say, save 1 hour, get very good sleep in 7 hours, save 1 hour. So for me, I can save 365 hours a year. Now, if my hour is worth $10 and my hour worth more than $10, but let's just say $10, it'll be $36.50 for me, one person. Now, if 1 billion people can benefit from this, it's huge economic impact, right? So in many different aspects, I think it's a very if we can get there, it's very powerful, very beneficial to humanity to have that. Because I always say humanity, we cannot keep going to have more and more Alzheimer every year gets higher, or Parkinson, depression, any disease you look, right? It's like going this way. And so I think figure out how to help people get good night's sleep can help us halt this trajectory and maybe even start to decrease. And that's just talk about disease, but from economic point of view, it also has huge potential, right?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, obviously, there's many benefits that would come if we could make people more efficient sleepers. We know that there are natural short sleepers, as you discussed. They're rare, but they exist. They're fully functional. They live normal, healthy lives. So in principle, there should be some way we could make everyone or many people shorter sleepers and reap some benefits from that. But the whole thing is so mysterious that we're just not there yet.
Right.
But I think we do know that, even though we don't know how to make people sleep more efficient as the short sleepers, we do know lots of ways that people are breaking their sleep and making it less efficient, including, the use of technology and blue light and all that.
Right.
What can you tell us about how modern technology and the modern world is actually breaking or making worse people's sleep quality?
I think it's just in general, because there's so much stimulant all around us. So it makes us not go to bed at the time that we really should be going to bed, right? And also because you subject yourself to so much stimulant that it's harder to fall into sleep, right? And then next morning you need to get up to go to work or go to school, and therefore you don't get enough sleep. So it's a vicious cycle. And because of that, a lot of people are suffering from the sleep disruption or insufficient syndrome, right? I don't know what's the term for that, but let's just say it's syndrome. And that's so prevalent, right? And it's from everywhere around us, right? From drinking coffee, tea, from gadgets all the time, from watching movie or TV show that's scary or very tense before bedtime, because people tend to watch TV or movie in the evening hours. But if you are so tense after you watch TV, and then you will have harder time to fall asleep, right? So there's just so many different ways that we are breaking our sleep, normal, optimal sleep pattern, right? And that's really, I think, one of the major problem for our society today, really.
How does one determine what time and how long they should be sleeping
Yeah.
naturally? How would
Yeah.
you go about figuring that out if it's
Yes.
not clear to you?
Yes. So the way we suggest to people when people ask us is that if it's possible, they can go away to take vacation for 2 weeks and without any coffee or tea or alcohol, even any beverage to influence their sleep schedule, and really live in a way that's more natural and see where they are at the end of the 2 weeks. What is the best time they feel they need to go to bed, and wake up naturally to see what's the best time for them to wake up and how many hours of sleep that really helps them to really. The idea is to take away all the environmental factors and just go somewhere 2 weeks or longer than 2 weeks would be ideal, and just figure out yourself because nobody can tell you your optimum sleep schedule and duration, right? Only you can figure out for yourself. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we tell people.
So basically, you would need to go on some kind of vacation, like camping or something, for at least a couple of weeks, where you have a minimum of you minimize the artificial light environment, you minimize substances that have stimulating or depressant effects. So that means things like caffeine and alcohol, and you're sort of living on a natural rhythm, with
Yeah,
the sun going up and sun going down and all that. And then you would just need to see, like, no
right,
alarm's going to go off, but you will just sort of wake up at a natural time.
right.
You're not going to need to go to sleep at a certain time, but you'll tend to get tired at a certain time.
Yes,
That would be the
yes,
way to do it.
yes, yeah.
And like, how clear is the connection between a disturbed sleep cycle and things like aging and things like neurodegeneration? Is there a very clear relationship there?
I think the most evidence come from shift worker,
Mm,
right? So shift workers, they have higher chance to get a lot of diseases, right? A lot of diseases, cancer and degeneration. Yeah, so I think that's most evidence come from shift workers. Yeah.
and
But some people can do shift work all their life and have no problem.
yeah,
So
yeah,
again, it's a part of genetic background, right?
yeah. But in general, most people who do shift work, meaning they're basically working and being awake at night instead of the
Right,
day, that
right.
tends to be associated with problems across the board.
Yeah, they have higher chance. It's similar to people who don't get enough sleep.
Hmm.
They have
Hmm.
more problem across the board.
Yeah.
And it depends on your genetic composition, genetic background. You may have higher chance of this disease versus that disease, right? So it's just like if you do yourself a favor, get the best sleep you can. You may carry some genetic thing that your family has higher chance to get disease A, but the chance for you to get that maybe is when you reach 90 or 100 years old.
Mm.
If you don't do that for yourself and on a long-term basis, subject yourself to sleep schedule disruption or sleep deprivation, then you may get it at 50 or 60, right? It's all like that, right? So not everybody is the same. It depends on your genetic background, and you may get this disease and they may get that diseases. But across the board, it has higher chance to get all kinds of diseases if you're a shift worker or if you don't get enough sleep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the other things that your lab studies is demyelinating diseases. Can you talk a little bit about what those are and if there's any connection to sleep there?
No, it has no. So those are the diseases I studied early on in my career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my career, early on when I was a postdoc, I was studying, mental retardation and different diseases, and I worked in the industry for 5 years. And when I came back from industry, I came back to demyelinating diseases. So myelin is this lipid sheath around our nerves, and most famous one is the multiple sclerosis.
Mm.
And so then I also started to work on sleep, but about 10 years after I came back, right, 10 years into study sleep, it really was so obvious to me that if I could crack sleep, I could help many, many diseases. So at that point, I thought there's no point to study disease. So I started to stop all the diseases and just focus on the sleep.
I see. So you basically your research strategy was instead of focusing on one type of disease, because sleep is so fundamental for health generally, and it's going to connect with disease potential generally. If you get poor sleep, you're susceptible to many different conditions and diseases. It was a strategic choice basically to focus on sleep.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. What are some of the things that you're working on today? Some of the more exciting projects related to sleep and its genetic basis?
Well, we continue to collect these people, right? A lot of people came to us, and then we want to be able to continue to find more mutations. But right now, the main focus is really try to find the converged pathway. That to me is very, very important to really understand what is the main pathway or mechanism that regulate our sleep efficiency and quality. That is the top priority. And we're doing it in both molecular way and also circuit, right? Because the circuit is very important because it's such a complex system, but we need to know where in the brain is really the main region that is involved in sleep efficiency regulation, because you can see it's a complex circuit, and if you offset many different parts, and maybe they are not the main nodule, but it could cause a sleep wake change, but they are not the main nodule of the circuit, right? So we're trying to identify this merged pathway at the circuit and molecular. And another thing very interesting is these short sleepers are almost all of them are very optimistic, very resilient, and very active during the day. Even though they sleep 4 hours, 3 hours, or 5 hours, they're very active, and have very high. It's high performance people. I will call them high performance.
So on average, they basically tend to have a good mood. They have an optimistic outlook, and they're very active, even though they're getting less sleep. You might think naturally that the less sleep you get, the less active you'll be.
Yeah.
But they share those waking traits in common to being short sleepers.
Yeah. So I call them Homo sapien 2.0. We are Homo sapien 1.0, so I call them for Homo sapien 2.0. So some of the things we're doing is try to use our mouse models to understand what is the resilient regulatory pathway, right? Because it's very difficult to study a lot of these things, because if you just look at the normal mice or normal people, you don't have something to compare with, right? And so we have mouse model from these short sleepers. They are also more resilient, right? And they also can perform better. So we can use the mouse model to understand how is the resilience or stress response regulated in our body, and also look at how the cognitive function is regulated, or how, many different ways. So that's another area that we're trying to explore. And another area, like I said, is that we're trying to see if we can bring the research and translate into something to help everybody to be able to live like a Homo sapien 2.0. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things.
Yeah. And can you give us a more concrete idea for how common is the short sleeper phenotype in humans? Is it 5% of people? Is it 1% of people? Is it less?
Less than 1%. I would say less than 1 in 10,000. That would be
okay. So it's
very,
rare.
very small. But the long sleeper is even more rare. So, yeah.
So it probably truly is a new type of mutation that was not advantageous in the past.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say about your research, or anything you want to reiterate about what we discussed so far?
No, but I think for all this podcast or whatever interview I do, I feel like the main message is for people to understand how important sleep is for them, right? Because if we ask people healthy living, people think, oh, eat healthy food or exercise every day, right? And they completely forget about sleep. But actually, to me, after studying sleep 30 years, I think sleep comes before healthy food and exercise. And I think the main message is people need to start to really be aware how important this is to us, right? And I always say that there are only 2 things, in my opinion, are more important than sleep. One is air, because we cannot live without air, oxygen. In a few minutes, we will die. And the other thing is water, right? And without water, we will die pretty soon. Without sleep, we will die pretty fast, right? In a few weeks. Without food, we can live for a couple months or longer, right? And so I think the message is people need to start pay attention on sleep and put getting good sleep as one of their priority for their healthy living, healthy lifestyle.
All right, Professor Ying-Hui Fu, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. Hey everyone, I want to take just a minute to tell you about a really cool health monitoring device I've been using called Lumen. It's a handheld, pocket-sized device with a sleek design. The Lumen device measures CO2 levels in your breath, which allows their technology to determine the extent to which your body is burning fats versus carbohydrates. Lumen helps improve your metabolic flexibility, your body's efficiency in shifting between using fats and carbs for energy. I use this device in the morning or before bed or after meals or after workouts to track my metabolism. With just a couple weeks of use, I learned a lot about which foods were causing my body to burn mostly fat, mostly carbs, or both, as well as how long I needed to fast and how hard I needed to exercise to promote fat burning. Being able to track whether your body is burning fat versus carbs will help you figure out how your body responds to your lifestyle and whether or not your weight loss and fitness strategies are actually working. Lumen is great for anyone looking to optimize their health for either weight loss or athletic performance. Their easy-to-use app allows you to track your results together with what you're eating and how you're exercising, and it syncs with other devices like the Apple Watch. Click the link in the episode description to learn more and use the code MINDMATTER, MINDMATTER, to get 10% off your Lumen device today. That's on top of the site-wide sale they are currently running, and the Lumen device is eligible to be paid for with FSA and HSA health accounts. Check out the link in the episode description for more info.